a Wild Bill Cox, look under the Shroud of Turin. Catholic Christianity possesses a teeming multitude of amazing cultural artifacts known collectively as sacred or holy relics. The finger bones of Saint So-and-so, the hip bones of Saint Thus-and-so, the staff by which Saint Patrick drove the snakes, the Ammonites, from Ireland. These oddities are all part of a colorful, weird-as-can-be history of Western culture. At one time, during the High Middle Ages, two churches, widely separated in space, both claimed to hold by virtue of piety and purity of faith the foreskin of baby Jesus, sans corruption, safe in their reliquaries. 2 foreskins for one baby. Now that's a miracle, and doubly painful considering Judaic tradition, if I ever heard one. One of those holy relics is the Shroud of Turin, arguably the most famous of all such items of veneration in Western culture. This object of extreme import has been held for many years by the Catholic Church as the burial wrap of none other than Jesus the Nazarene. We also know him as Jesus Christ the Messiah. Considering how important this man, or man-god, or God, depending on your point of view, is to the Christian faith, which is now shared in one form or another by over 1 billion people worldwide, I think it is safe to say that all of us would very much like to know if this potentially powerful relic is, or is not, what it is said to be. Many think it is. Others, just as clueless, think they're a bunch of credulous retards who'd believe anything if there was wine and free crackers involved, like yuppies at a trendy gallery showing off their artistic ignorance while chowing down in high style. Who do you believe, for instance? A book written by a guy who talked to a guy who claimed to know a guy who was really holy, and that guy had a dream wherein someone he thought was God told him that, geez, that one's even tough for me to swallow, and I'm inclined to believe in a historical, holy Jesus. Or it was mooted, should we just cut the human element out altogether and turn the matter over to, hopefully, dispassionate and preferably empirical science? Surely the paper men of science, a man of science's whole reason for existence, after all, is his or her PhD, and it's printed on paper, is it not, will know more than all the philosophers of the ancient world about this topic they've never even considered, right? Well, sure. Most of us would rather believe something new and fresh, after all. Who believes in anything old guys say anyway? So, after long, profitable silence, the Church finally let the new upstart religion called science in to see the holiest relic in all of Christendom. Interesting, was the original observation, followed by something like, I understand that my being able to witness this unmatched treasure in its full majesty is really, really cool and all, but, well, I'd really like to take it back to the lab for a more detailed analysis. Here in the reliquary, I don't have the tools capable of really analyzing the thing. So they allowed him to sneak a piece of the sacred cloth. It made sense, of course. How could one analyze something one didn't have a piece of? Well, one thing led to another, and test to test, and nobody agreeing on the results until, perforce, someone realized that with every bit of the shroud destroyed, more questions, not fewer, were raised about its veracity and authenticity. Eventually, it seemed to clerics looking down on the forlorn remnants, scientists would nickel and dime the shroud away into labs for even more rarefied experimentation until, inevitably, there'd be none of it left to debate. If that wasn't bad enough, the holy men involved began to realize that dispassionate, logical science is not without its schismatic heresies, bald-faced heretics, and, most embarrassingly, outright fudgers of data at the highest levels. Case in point, lifted from the Wikipedia coverage, and I'm quoting, Mark Anderson, who was working for Macron, analyzed the shroud samples. In his book, Ray Rogers states that Anderson, who is Macron's Raman microscopy expert, observed that the samples acted as organic material when he subjected them to the laser, but Macron refused to accept the observation, for he wanted the conclusion that the image was painted with hematite. In his open letter to journalists, Daniel R. Porter states that Macron suppressed the results of Anderson. His exclusionary focus is understandable, of course. Science, naturally being science, the bias was away from the mystical, the magical, the metaphysical, so that most learned men of modern days believe that the shroud is nothing more than a hoax, easily repeated, as science claims by virtue of the universal reciprocity of experimentation, that every secret can be revealed to anyone with a suitable grant and enough grad students living on dreams and Boston baked beans. Unfortunately, it can't be. Technologies of the times whether you believe the shroud wrapped the face of our Holy Savior in 33 AD or merely struck the mind of a forger and scoundrel of a type often found amongst those with free cash in the 14th century, simply cannot replicate the effect. In fact, as late as 1989, physicist Thomas Phillips theorized that the shroud image was formed by neutron radiation due to a miraculous bodily resurrection. But he'd need to run a lot more destructive tests on the remaining fragments, just to make sure. Should events proceed apace as they often do in this imperfect world, the day that last bit of the shroud is vaporized for spectral analysis, the chief scientist in charge will publish a book decrying the lack of real challenges for science to meet head-on and defeat utterly. And there still won't be a definitive answer on the shroud's authenticity. Just saying. Oh, by the way, when I spoke to who listens to old people anyway, I should have put in a disclaimer, except, of course, for Herodotus, Aristotle, Lucretius, Brahe, Galileo, Newton, Einstein, Rutherford, Fermi, Gell-Mann, and Hawking. But they're all scientists, so